Bright QT. Every student matters.
Hello students, now let's talk about our next topic here, that is New Economic Policy, that is also known as NEP 1921 to 1928. Now here students, before this we have talked about the October Revolution. We saw in this the fall of the provincial government and the coming up of Bolsheviks as the only power in Russia, under whose leadership? So it is under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin. We also talked about Lenin here, right? So we learned that Lenin, he was in his early life, he was basically in exile, right? He came back in 1917 to Russia when he gave his major demands, and also he wanted to take over the government here, right? So we also saw that there were many changes and policies that were brought about by the Bolsheviks here in Russia. And one of the important parts here that you have to study is the new economic policy introduced by Lenin. So here, let us try to understand what were the changes that were introduced in Russia and what was the main aim behind it. So students, when we are talking about the new economic policy, we see that the main aim behind it was to revive and stabilize the Russian economy. Now see the timeline here students. Why do you think that Russians, they wanted to stabilize the Russian economy? Why was the need there for this? So we are talking about the period that has that is after the First World War. Okay, so till 1918, 1919, the World War here, it got concluded 1918 to 1919. But when we are talking about the contribution of the Russians in the First World War, we saw that they had faced a major impact on industries as well as the common people. Therefore, this was the need of the hour to stabilize and revive the Russian economy. Now, when they came to the power, they had a lot of things that they wanted to do. Who? The Bolsheviks. So, Lenin here, he now decided to adopt the mixed economy. Now, you are seeing a new term here, that is mixed economy. Have you heard this term, students? Definitely in your economics paper, you must have heard about this term, that is mixed economy. Now, when we are saying the mixed economy, what does that mean? It means that this is an economic system in which the government as well as private individuals, let's say here, they have control over the economy here, the whole system. So this is the mixed economy. Government and private ownership here. Okay. So the government also has powers here, and when we are talking about the private individuals, they are also given certain power in this kind of economic system, certain control here. Now by example, we are going to understand this. Now here we see that when Lenin, he came to the power. Now while talking about the Bolsheviks here, we see that when Lenin, he came to the power, there were certain demands, right? The lands to be redistributed among the peasants. Apart from that, the banks that should be nationalized, and also the war that should come to an end. Now, war has come to an end. Lands were now being redistributed to the peasants, right? This was one thing that was happening here in Russia. Apart from this, banks were now being nationalized. So, the government took the control of all the major industries, trade and banking in Russia. Okay. Apart from this, we also see that individuals were allowed to sell their food grains in open market. Yes, students. Now, the government is also having the control over the economic system here, but the private individuals, they were also given certain powers, right? Certain control here. So, these individuals, they were now encouraged to sell their food grains in open markets. Here we are talking about the peasants, the workers, right? who were involved in these small businesses. Now these workers, they were also encouraged to open the small workshops that had been closed down during the First World War, right? So there was this labor shortage because of which these small workshops were closed down. Here, under this new economic policy, what are we seeing? We are seeing that these workers were given this power, right? So that they can run their own small businesses, they could open their small workshops, okay? Now, stable currency was also introduced in order to revive the Russian economy. This is very important point here, right? When we look in global terms. Now, the main idea was to encourage economic contribution of workers, peasants in rural and the urban areas. Yes, students. Now, like I told you, there was this adoption of mixed economy. So here, the main idea was that the government having the control of the economic system in order to stabilize the economy, they also gave this idea of partial capitalism, right? So the capitalists, they could also have some control, but not overall control, right? And also these workers and the peasants, they were also encouraged to give some economic contribution on their side. Therefore, they were asked or encouraged to open small workshops, to run small businesses. They were asked to sell their food grains in open market at the prices that they wanted. But the major industries, the trade and the banking, these were again under the control of the government. So this is how the mixed economy worked here in Russia. And the main aim, if anyone asks you what was the main aim for this, so you have to say that the main aim was to revive and stabilize the Russian economy. Okay. Now here, coming to the exercise section, we see the first question here is, discuss any two features of the new economic policy. Now you have to just write two features. Quite easy question here, students. So in this you can talk about the adoption of mixed economy, right? The first point is the adoption of mixed economy, and the second point that can be written here is that the control of industries, trade and banks was now under the government, right? And if you remember some other points, definitely you can mention all the points that we have learned now, that the individuals were allowed to sell the food grains in open markets, right? That was not done earlier here. Okay. So there are various points that we have learned just now. Since two features have been asked, just mention any two that you can remember. Now the second question here is, comment on the role of Lenin in the revolution and his contribution to the economic policy. Now here, students, we have talked about the October Revolution. So I'm just giving you the key pointers here. Talk about the contribution of Lenin in the October Revolution, how he led the revolution, right? Helped in the formation of military revolutionary committee, and how before this only he put forward the demands. He put forward three main demands, right? You have to talk about that as well, because it pressurized the government also, right? And then you can talk about how they challenged the government by destroying the public offices, the government offices, and how the Winter Palace it was shelled. And then Bolsheviks, they became the only power here in Russia, the unchallenged power here, right? Now contribution to the economic policy. Now once they have come to the power, there were new changes that were brought down in the economic front here, right? So here we just have learned about the new economic policy, talk about the mixed economy that was adopted and how the banks, they were nationalized, right, and industries and trade, it came under the government control, but there was partial capitalism. Now in this system, the capitalists, they own the property. Capitalism. Okay. So in this system, what happens? The capitalist, the big enterprise, who own big enterprises, who own businesses, they have a lot of capital, right? So therefore, they were also given some power, right? So here the main idea was to encourage the economic contribution of the peasants and the workers. These are some of the main pointers that you have to include in this question while talking about the economic policy introduced between 1921 to 1928. Okay. Thank you.